Namaskar and welcome at 6:30 and time to reflect on the top stories of the day with our reporters joining us live on this broadcast with big inputs on the top stories. We will be talking about big statement by Prime Minister on time for bold decisions and bold investments. We also will be putting in perspective the latest Fitch ratings, the significance of it, but also, we'll talk about what makes this nod for lifting of ban on the export of hydrochlorine significant. But on the top of this broadcast, the first breaking news that we are coming in are the big takeaways of the recently concluded MEA briefing as far as the disengagement of troops between India and China at the border is concerned, and much more. And that happens to be the top story. And I believe I have with me my colleague Abhishek Jha joining us live. And as Abhishek joins us live, let us also tell our viewers in the recently concluded MEA briefing. In fact, yes, Abhishek, if you could hear me. Yes. So first things first, the disengagement of the troops from both sides and the latest, the forward movement in terms of de-escalation of any sort of tension that is prevailing between the two sides at the border. What's been the biggest outcome of this briefing?
Okay, so Shakal, as the MEA has told earlier also that there are well laid out mechanism from both sides because this border tension is nothing new or nothing that has come out of the blue, and it keeps on happening every year or almost like at various points of the year, because we know that those areas are very much snow-capped mountain terrains, and this is this whole boundary issue is an issue of perception, because the armies when they go back and they come back, they sometimes try to pinpoint where their earlier position was, because after once the snow melts, there are significant demarcation line is not exactly there. So these are the major logistical issues that keeps on happening, and so there is well laid out mechanism both at diplomatic level and military level, where the countries regularly are engaged to sort out any differences that they have had ever. This time also, since this escalation was reported in media also, so on the 6th of this month, there was this high-level military meeting between both the countries, and the issue was discussed. And soon after that, we learned that there has been substantial disengagement in terms of military from both the countries on those bordering areas where those TIF were reported. So today also the MEA said that the mechanism remains the same. We are continuously engaged with China. The diplomacy and the military leadership both are continuously in talk with each other. And anything that has been an issue of contention is being sorted very peacefully and calmly. And both the sides are very much, in touch with each other on these issues.
But India, the way you're briefing it and the developments yesterday, one thing is very clear, Abhishek, you would agree that India has once again reiterated or perhaps shown its firm resolve in terms of not only bringing the troops reinforcements at the LOC points under dispute, but also a lot of maturity shown by our sides at the diplomatic level, at the military level, to see to it that this tension or the perception of the tension eases out gradually.
Second, a lot of credit for these, the continuous negotiation and the maturity that you said goes to our leadership. Prime Minister has continuously been engaging with Chinese leadership. We've also seen that recently when in Chennai, both the leadership met. They also discussed about the Chennai Connect, and in those informal talks in Wuhan or in Chennai, the leadership has discussed that there are, no doubt, there are differences of opinion on so many issues, including trade, boundary disputes, because India and China happens to be the close neighbor. There are hundreds of kilometers of boundary which crosses into their territory. So there, the tensions and the differences are bound to happen. But the mature way to deal with them would be to never disengage and always, collaborate and, be regularly in touch with each other, so that they can know and then sort out the differences of each other, and they can understand the point of concern of the other party also. This time also the same thing has happened. Once the issue was raised, both the country alerted their diplomatic missions, and the military leadership in the local area also alerted. and the discussion was discussion did take place. This time, a senior ranking
No, but
military officer,
Abhishek, do you get the sense? Well, if you look at the outcome of the commanders level meet between the two sides, and also the brief by the MEA officially, that there is a concerted effort being made from our side as far as this resolution of the border dispute, the demarcation of the border, this issue needs to be resolved once and for all.
Of course, Sakal, we know that there are border issues between India and China, and that dates back to a lot of historical facts, and there has been contention in the past also. But as of now, we know that in the last decade at least, India and China both have taken this issue very maturely. In our present mechanism, our NSA, Ajit Doval, is representing any border talks with China, where Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is representing Chinese side. So there is a mechanism where both the sides are regularly meeting and catching up with each other's issue and their the point of concern as far as boundary disputes and boundary demarcation line is concerned. So it would be really great to believe the fact that both the nations are sincerely looking after their issues and differences, and they want to sort this difference as soon as possible. And the highest, I would say that NSA Doval is representing India, and Wang Yi, who is also very influential and close to the leadership in China, he is also representing Chinese side. So surely the highest of the order of the highest leadership is interested in these talks, and the confidence of both the leadership are dealing with the issue. So one can imagine that these issues will be sorted very soon as the talks and dialogues of regularly progresses.
What was the MEA's response to all those questions related to resolution of the border demarcation issue, and also what also has been the Chinese the Chinese establishment, their response to the whole situation at the diplomatic level as well as at the military level?
Second, one thing which both the sides have shown very maturely this time also, because once this border issue happens, it becomes a sensational issue for the media on either side. So this time, what we have seen so far, that the news, trickling of information has been very much restricted, and only the people who are concerned, like the diplomatic level and the military level, they have been doing their job underneath, and there has not been very insensitive remarks or something that can distort the situation rather from either side. So China has also behaved very maturely. India on its own part has also not tried to make the situation bad. And as far as because both the sides have realized the fact that there is an issue, and India has also earlier said that we know that there is a neighbor, there is a boundary issue, and the differences are bound to happen. Our FM has also said it earlier. So, but the differences are bound to happen. But the fact is that we acknowledge the point that there is a difference. That is a big thing. And now, once we acknowledge that there is a difference, then only we can move forward and sort those issues out. This is, I think, the mature way to handle this situation, and both the sides are showing this maturity.
So as far as today's briefing is concerned, Abhishek, the bigger takeaway perhaps would be that both sides agreed to agree on one thing, that this needs to be resolved amicably, whether it is at the military level or at the diplomatic level, the diplomatic engagement. Well, that's the positive news, a big story coming in from Abhishek Jha. Thank you so much, Abhishek, for joining us live. Thank you. And now let's move on and talk about the other big story of the day. Remember, we told you that Prime Minister, in fact, today earlier has said that the time has come for Indian industry to work towards creating a globally competitive domestic supply chain while taking Indian economy out of command and control mode towards plug and play mode. He further says that this is also a time to take bold decisions and bold investments. Let's listen.
अब तमाम सेक्टर्स, खासकर कोल और माइनिंग के सेक्टर को अधिक कॉम्पिटिटिव बनाने के लिए जो रिफॉर्म्स अनाउंस हुए हैं, उसका भरपूर फायदा उठाने के लिए उद्योग जगत आगे आए। मेरे युवा साथी, आप आगे आए।
Prime Minister has also urged the industry leaders to come forward and take opportunity of reforms announced in various sectors of economy.
एक बड़ा काश हर भारतीय के मन में रहा है, मस्तिष्क में रहा है। ये काश क्या है? काश हम मेडिकल इक्विपमेंट के क्षेत्र में आत्मनिर्भर होते, काश हम डिफेंस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में आत्मनिर्भर होते, काश हम कोल और मिनरल्स के सेक्टर में आत्मनिर्भर होते, काश हम एविएशन सेक्टर में भी आत्मनिर्भर होते। ऐसे कितने सारे काश, अनगिनत काश हमेशा से हर भारतीय को झकझोरते रहे हैं। साथियों, एक बहुत बड़ी वजह रही है कि बीते 5-6 वर्षों में देश की नीति और रीति में भारत की आत्मनिर्भरता का लक्ष्य सर्वोपरि रहा है। अब कोरोना क्राइसिस ने हमें इसकी गति और तेज करने का सबक दिया है। इसी सबक से निकला है आत्मनिर्भर भारत अभियान।
Prime Minister also maintained while the world is fighting the pandemic, India should convert the COVID-19 crisis into a turning point towards becoming a self-reliant nation.
आत्मनिर्भर भारत के मूल में जो मंत्र है वो है आत्मविश्वासी भारतीय। हर भारतीय आत्मविश्वासी होगा तो आत्मनिर्भर भारत की यात्रा बहुत कम समय में हम जीत लेंगे।
My colleague Arun, who is tracking the story very, very closely, joining us live on this broadcast. Arun, over to you. When Prime Minister says that we have to get our Indian economy out of command and control mode, but towards plug and play mode. I think this is a very big statement and a visionary statement. At the same time, Prime Minister also, elaborated on this Atmanirbhar larger mission, which of course is now going to be, one of the flagship programs of the government. Just sum it up, Arun. What was the underlying message rather of Prime Minister's address today, especially on those bold decisions and bold investments lines?
That's right, Sakar. If you look at the underlying message, the message was loud and clear that how can the challenges be converted into opportunity going forward as far as the business community is concerned. We know this fact that India is facing various challenges on the economic front, but it is not only India. All the other countries are facing the same problem. That is the economic problem because of slowdown, because of demand contraction. All the economies are facing the same problem. But how can the challenges be converted into opportunity? That's an underlying message. But yes, there are three big takeaways as far as Prime Minister Narendra Modi's address was concerned. The number one message was very much, loud and clear, and that was how can imports be converted into exports. In a sense, Prime Minister clearly said that we import a lot of things. This includes edible oil, this includes electronic equipment, these includes a lot of things that we're importing as of now. So how can, as a nation, how can the corporate sector of our country can find ways so that whatever we are importing as of now, we can cut our dependency on our import, and we can basically create a manufacturing hub of all those things. Given the fact, the example is like of coal reserves in our country. India is having largest coal reserve in the world, one of the largest coal reserve in the world. But then also, despite that, India is importing 70 to 80% of its coal requirement. So that's the reason why government is clearly focusing on as to how can we become manufacturing hub, number one. Number two, people, planet, and of course profit. All these three things go hand in, and that was a big message of Prime Minister Modi. He clearly appealed to the corporate sector of our country that you should work for the people. You should work keeping in mind environment or planet, and profits are bound to happen to you because people, profit, and of course the planet are interlinked together. So of course we have to grow in a manner which is sustainable, number one, which is inclusive in nature. That means it includes more and more people. It thinks about people. people. And yes, environment should not be compromised. That was a second big takeaway. Third, I mean, last but not the least, the biggest takeaway was of the northeastern region. How can northeastern region be made a major global hub, or as far as organic farming is concerned? We know this fact that Sikkim is an organic state, and without the development of the eastern state, the northeastern state, India actually can't grow. So that's a bigger message, that how can northeastern states, how can an investor find opportunity in the northeastern region, and of course make northeastern states a global hub of organic farming, of organic food, which can be exported to globally. So how can we in a sense find our own strength? We can strengthen all those strengths further, and we can also find our own weaknesses, and how can we convert these weaknesses into greater opportunities going forward? So that's a big message and big takeaway from the Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
A bit of an elaboration, Arun, a bit of elaboration very briefly on the bold investments part, when he specifically talk about giving more boost to manufacturing sector, although in West Bengal, because but then this address had a larger optics attached to it. Manufacturing sector revival and bold investments in that space.
Well, if I may sum it up in that way, I mean, look at this way, Sakal, that as of now, the investors, the business community is actually scared to invest. I mean, not only in India, all across the world, because they are of the fear that the demand is not picking up in the market. And if they are making any kind of investment, it is very much likely that investment might get trapped as of now, because there is no demand in the market. And in that context, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has clearly said that government is standing right behind you to protect you. Government is incentivizing you, be it the MSME sector, be it the agriculture sector. Bold decisions have been taken as far as the MSME sector is concerned. We know this fact, definition of MSMEs have been changed. A lot of incentives have been given to MSME sector. A lot of funds and equity infusion is taking place in MSME sector. And for agriculture sector, the APMC Act has been amended. Now farmers can sell their produce to different states. They can go online. They can sell their produce to the corporate sector, big corporate giants as well. So this means government is taking reformist approach.
All right,
Arun. Yes. Is to bring in more investment going forward, and that's what the Prime Minister appeal was today to the investors.
Yes, thank you very much, Arun Sharma, for getting us that quick perspective on Prime Minister's address today in West Bengal. Thank you for joining. And now let's move on to the Fitch rating, which is also one of the other headlines of the day. It released its rating overview for India today. Now, according to the rating agency, India's economy is forecast to bounce back with a sharp growth rate of 9.5% next year. Listing positives for India, Fitch Ratings has said that there was a greater confidence in a sustained reduction in general government debt over the medium term to level closer to BBB peer median. Also, there is a possibility of higher sustained investment and growth rate without the creation of macroeconomic imbalances, such as from successful structural reforms implementation. Ajay, my colleague, is joining us on phone line as we stay with the Fitch ratings overview. Ajay, coming at a time when we are looking at, an economic slowdown, so to say, amidst the COVID crisis, revival of economy, plus then you have Fitch giving a sort of positive outlook. What are the reasons that this is really attributing, Fitch is attributing all this to? The growth rate that it has pegged, and how do you look at it?
Yeah, so first the reasons. First of all, the structural reforms that has been announced during the lockdown in the month of May by the Minister of Finance, especially in the field of opening up of the economies, and also addressing the backward and forward linkages into the agriculture sector. These are the two main factors which has led the credit rating agencies to actually have a very positive outlook for the growth for the next financial year. The inflation more or less has been under the target of 4%, which has been put forward by the RBI, and it has also lauded the efforts by RBI to contain the inflation. Going forward, it will have a bearing on the interest rate, which is very key for the common man like you and me, and also for the corporates. Remember, Sakal, in September 2019, the India offered to the world that it is ready to cut down the corporate rate tax from 30% to almost 22%. And for new firms, it has offered a corporate rate tax of 17%. So this is one of the best in the world, and that's why the credit rating agencies feel that once the manufacturing activities picks up post-COVID, India, USA, and China will be the three most bright spots on the world and on the global economy map, and India is going to have a very smart V-shaped recovery in 2021-22.
And how do you look at the credit rating agency Standard & Poor's forecast? How do you explain that? Because it is projected India's growth rate at 8.5, which is a little less than what the FIT says for 2021-22.
So for me, the projections for the next year is not very important because it will be the base impact. People will say that it is because of the base impact, because the growth is going down to 5% to 5.5% this year. The next year will show an obvious jump of 8% to 9%, which is called the base effect, because your base is low, so your growth will be higher in terms of numbers. But I am very encouraged to see that the report also suggests and talks about sustainable growth in the longer run. So it is talking about 10 years average. And that is very encouraging for me. And we expect that this sustainable growth is more important than just one year growth of 8.5 or 9.5% growth rate. Whether it happens or not, we'll have to see. But sustained growth rate in the next 5 to 10 years is more important for me. And the shackles of agriculture sector, which has been just broken by the central government through an audit, is going to structurally change the sector. And and manufacturing activities are likely to pick up post-COVID, and we know that we have a strength in the services sector, and that will obviously come back when we return post-COVID.
Yes, many thanks, Ajay, for joining us on this broadcast. Thank you. Now let's move on. Before we wrap up this broadcast, let's get you the latest on the COVID front. The centre has once again today rejected the suggestion of the community transmission spread of the COVID-19 in India. Remember, earlier today there was another press briefing by the Health Ministry where it is clearly indicated that there is absolutely no question as far as the whole community transmission amid the pandemic is concerned. The country, in fact, it has also, in fact, maintained. We talk about this press conference that DG ICMR, he has also categorically said that the prevalence of the deadly virus is only limited to 1% of the population, and there is no community spread. Now that is something which is the biggest takeaway of today's press conference, at least, contrary to the perception in some quarters that seems to be building up. My colleague Tapas, who tracks Health Ministry very, very closely amidst the COVID crisis, joining us live for a quick update on this now. Tapas, a bit of an elaboration on that question's response by the ministry officials that there is absolutely no community spread, and that 1% of the population, the virus infection is limited to that. I think that's the biggest headline.
Absolutely, that is the biggest headline. That a lot of talk going on about the fact that if India is in community transmission or not. But the way ICMR has came out and rejected all such suggestion. Is and the way India has started the lockdown, India's lockdown measures has actually helped in in understanding, and it helped in mitigate the effects of the virus that actually wreaked havoc in the world. So in that sense, one would say that this is the biggest headline coming from this press conference that happened.
But what could be the reasons as far as the consistency that we are looking at in terms of recovery rate going up?
Yes, absolutely. The reasoning behind this is basically this, that as if I can just tell you that 1,37,448 active cases are there, and more than that, 1,41,029 people have been cured. So if you take a look at the statistic, it clearly shows that India's methods and India's methodology in fighting this virus has definitely bore fruit. Definitely, there are some places where the situation does look a little grim, but the way the ICMR has spoken about it, they have made it very clear that there is no community transition as in the country. In fact, community transition is basically the third stage of the disease. The first stage is basically when it takes a form of pandemic. The second is when the virus starts transmitted locally. So the third stage is community transition, and that has not happened yet. And that is something because of even in the Sero survey that they have done.
There was also this point made by the officials about the survey that indicated that only 0.73% of the population had this evidence of the past virus infection, which means that we're looking at a situation.
Yes, and that actually sums up the... Right. So, Sakal, that's actually the crux of the situation, that if you're 1%, less than 1% of the population is affected, especially in states, especially.
Okay, I think we have a bit of a
pushes the case for the fact
inconsistency in that line with you. Thank you very much. Yes. I'm sorry, I'll have to wrap it up here, Tapash, but thank you very much for joining us, and apologies for a little bit of a audio snag there, viewers, when we were trying to connect to Tapash, our colleague. And with that, it's time to wrap up this broadcast. Meanwhile, news and updates continue on National Broadcaster DD News. Please stay with us. Namaskar.
है ना, इसका सब प्रॉपर चलता है।
कल उसके बैंक अकाउंट में 15,000 रुपए का फ्रॉड हुआ है, पता है?
इसको तो कोई टेंशन ही नहीं होती है, देखना।
टेंशन क्यों? मेरी कोई गलती नहीं थी। फिर भी फ्रॉड होने पर मैंने तुरंत बैंक को इन्फॉर्म कर दिया। आरबीआई कहता है अगर आपके अकाउंट से किसी ने धोखे से पैसे निकाले हैं तो बैंक को जल्द से जल्द इन्फॉर्म कीजिए। 3 दिन के अंदर इन्फॉर्म किया तो कोई नुकसान नहीं होगा। जितना लेट करोगे उतना ज्यादा नुकसान। और सुन, सब चलता नहीं है, प्रॉपर चलाना पड़ता है। आरबीआई कहता है जानकार बनिए, सतर्क रहिए।
Hello everyone, I'm Abhishek Mahajan, and in the last episode of Exchange Thoughts we talked about online shooting, and this time around we'll talk about online e-racing. It's a unique concept, and what happened was the prominent Indian race drivers, they came out with this unique idea of starting the new e-racing which is virtual racing.